Let's welcome Dylan Burton, PhD candidate at the Michigan State University.
Hi, everyone. Should I go ahead and get started?
I'm sharing your screen right now. The stage is all yours, Dylan.
Awesome. Just going to set my timer. So, hi, everyone. I have no idea who's out there or how many people are in the audience. It's such a strange feeling doing these conferences online, but I'm guessing there's people out there that I know, and thanks for coming. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. This study I conducted a few years ago as part of my MA thesis at Lancaster University. And so what I'm presenting today, I've never presented to this audience before, and it's sort of a tangential offshoot of what I did. So this came out of a validation study of an instrument that I used for that study, and there are bits and pieces of this presentation today that are scattered throughout two papers that I published, one in System and one in Language Assessment Quarterly, and I'll provide full references at the end of this talk, and I'm happy to send you the papers if you don't have access to them. So a little bit of background about this study. The sort of overall context, I was looking at test task authenticity. And what does that actually mean when we talk about authenticity? Drawing from the literature, I put together sort of this simplistic model of authenticity. Authenticity can be multi-componential as well. One of the key features is text authenticity. So whether an actual written test, for example, on a reading text, matches up with something that might be used in a real life scenario. Another type of authenticity deals with a task. Do the tasks that we use in tests, do they match up with what we might expect of a test taker in real life settings, or is it just a pedagogical activity? We look at the behavior, the output from a test taker, and we consider whether that matches up with what's produced in real life settings. We might use corpora to do this, and other types of discourse methods. Another type of authenticity concerns the perceptions of test takers, whether those perceptions match up with what we would expect them to be. Does the test taker feel that the test itself is authentic, an authentic measure of language or an authentic sort of activity? And then also with the scoring rubrics, do they tie into real life criteria? But in this study, I was looking at engagement, and so authentic engagement referring to the cognitive processes. So when the test taker is speaking, does that person tap into those skills that we would expect them to cognitively, those thought processes, and do they result in behaviors that are also ostensibly authentic? And my interest in this study came from work that I was doing in China. I was working with test takers that would often go home and then upload the speech prompts online to these forums where, you know, hundreds of thousands of students, or maybe thousands, would go and they would use those prompts to prepare for the test. Can't blame them. They want to get a high score. It was a high stakes test to enter universities. But the problem was that during the test environments, there were concerns about these inauthentic thought processes because the test takers were seemingly rehearsing speech, or they weren't spontaneously engaging with the examiners because they had already seen the prompt. They knew what to expect. And so in this thesis, I dug into the topic and I found an operationalization of inauthentic engagement that was really helpful for the study. And it focused on these aspects of focusing on form rather than content, on focusing on really a score-focused approach to the test rather than a communication-focused approach to the test. And different studies in the literature have found similar findings relating to inauthenticity or sort of canned or memorized speech in different contexts. And it's almost always related to a score-focused approach. Now, in this study that I'm talking about today, the sort of analysis that I did, I'm looking at off-topic responses. And so really the key question is, do off-topic responses, are they the same thing as inauthentic engagement? Because when you read through the literature, there are some indications that it is. And in fact, when you look at operational concerns, often it is, some tests penalize off-topic responses quite specifically. They might dock them a point, or they might even throw them out completely. So in my research, I found that some tests, they quantify these off-topic responses as non-scorable. They're not scored at all. And the justification for that is that it's a quick way, and it's a very reliable way to detect memorization or scripted responses, but it doesn't mean that it's completely valid. Other tests offer less guidance. They might encourage raters to not think about the off-topic responses if it's like a test with multiple tasks. Maybe focus on the tasks that are on topic and then only grade the language from those. Others might encourage raters to dock points. But the problem is that consistency is an issue. It's unknown whether raters, if they reliably detect on or off-topic responses, and whether they agree. And that's a really key issue if scores are at stake. So in this analysis that I'm talking about today, I want to really dig into two research questions. One is, how does topic relevance relate to authentic engagement? And the second is, how do examiners deal with these off-topic responses? So in the original study, I had 58 trained IELTS examiners. They rated 10 different speaking scripts that I collected. These IELTS examiners, they were from all over the world. Most of them were highly experienced. They had been working with the test for a long time. And they were familiar with the local context as well in some of the cases. From those raters, I took 7 of them and I did stimulated recall to gather qualitative data that I coded and analyzed thematically. Now, the raters, when they were rating the scripts, they did not use the IELTS band descriptors. They used this instrument that I devised in order to detect authentic engagement. In other words, whether the scripts were memorized or rehearsed or whatever. And so I built this script using the literature, so drawing from the studies I mentioned before and a few others. And sort of these studies defined authentic engagement through behavior, because we can't look inside of a test taker's head yet. And so they defined authentic engagement through the test taker's behavior, through their discourse, their responses, as, for example, scripted, unscripted. On-topic, off-topic comes up a lot in the literature. Mechanical and natural delivery, spontaneous or rehearsed, and then also related to the actual task response, whether it sounds contrived or genuine. And this is the actual language that's used in the literature. I also added in smooth and stilted fluency, affected and natural pronunciation, and then a couple of other measures of just language itself. And so all of the raters used these 9 categories on all of the 10 responses when they rated. And so here are some of the results from that. This is a correlation analysis. Now, first of all, you can see that these elements of authentic engagement, they did correlate, right? So we see quite high correlations between scriptedness, naturalness, spontaneity, and genuineness. There are also pretty, moderately strong correlations between fluency, lexis, and level. But the thing that I expected to find, which was relevance, correlating with these other elements, it didn't really correlate quite strongly. It correlated kind of with everything at a medium to low level. And another thing that's interesting is that the mean scores on each of these criteria for all of the test takers, the standard deviations were somewhat higher, not hugely higher, but they were higher for relevance than they were for the other categories, which suggests that the raters are not using them as consistently. Keep in mind, this is not an estimate of reliability, but it just gives us a bit of information about the variance within the score category. So something is happening here with relevance. So I wanted to dig into what exactly might be happening, and so I did a principal components analysis. This was to summarize the data set to see if there was kind of a structure. It's not the same as exploratory factor analysis, of course, but within this, I found that there appeared to be sort of 2 components. You could argue for 3, but this is the pattern matrix for the 2-component structure, and we can see that scriptedness, spontaneity, genuineness, and naturalness, they load quite strongly on one factor, and this, or one component, which I considered an authenticity component. So a pretty strong rationale for this instrument measuring authentic engagement in this case. Unexpected to me, there was a second component there that actually loaded quite strongly with these language elements, which suggested there was like a proficiency component. So with my scale, there's kind of two main constructs between each other. But what was really surprising again is that relevance, topic relevance, on topic, off topic, cross-loaded, not a strong loading on either one. And so this really calls into question that something is happening with topic relevance. We're seeing this sort of, imagine like a seesaw, right? It's kind of going back and forth between authentic engagement and language. And the only real way that we can dig into what's going on is by looking at qualitative data. And so for this analysis, I went back to my data set this year and I dug out some examples that kind of illustrate what might be happening here. So I found one trend that topic relevance, or on or off topic, it sometimes does relate to engagement. So these thought processes in the test. With this comment, as long as they were on topic, it came across as authentic. So here we have a one-to-one relationship, right? It's on topic, it's authentic. The opposite also sort of seemed to be true. In this case, the examiner had identified the script as being off topic and felt that the person was trying to trick the interviewer into thinking it's spontaneous. It's off topic, but by inserting these words into the text to make it seem more on topic. But it came off as memorized. And so it came off as contrived, as not really being authentic at all. And so here's a relationship between off topic leading the examiner to think that the person is not engaged. Here's another example. This person is, they detect that either the person is memorized or off topic, maybe both. And so the examiner in this case is sort of, making an equivalence between the two. Maybe they're the same, at least one of them is there. I'm not really sure which one. And then here we have an interesting example that relates directly to the scores. So here the examiner felt the test taker was trying to recite a speech. A word would come out, sounded like it fit the theme, but it was off topic overall. And so this examiner says I couldn't give her any credit for it. Now keep in mind that with my instrument, there was no requirement for the task responses to be on topic, but the examiner still marked this person down. Couldn't give her credit for the response because it was off topic. It's problematic, right? It wasn't in my scale description at all. Now, there was another trend where sometimes topic relevance was related to language proficiency, and this came up in the data set, specifically with language development. And this examiner quite eloquently put it that the response was off topic, but it seemed like things that she had learned, so sort of recycling, and that was an indication of her current language development. So this type of, this maybe functional language or just repeated phrases or whatever that the test taker has learned in their classes, and also possibly a misunderstanding of the prompt. But this is more related to the test taker's language proficiency, language development, than it is this test taker trying to get around the system or using like an inappropriate thought process. In this case, the examiner didn't think it was memorized at all. It was off topic, but had horrible fluency. And so we can see it's off topic, but the low fluency, sort of this disconnect between language proficiency and the actual task response, made the examiner feel like it was not a memorized response. So here we have this sort of push and pull between three key elements. We have the authentic engagement, the topic relevance, and then also language proficiency, and they're sort of blending together to inform the examiner. Yeah, and it's the same with this last example. It feels more genuine because the speech is slow when he's off topic. Now, another trend that came up was that there were problems, for example, with listening comprehension. So this person felt that it was a genuine answer, but maybe she just misunderstood the prompt. Here again, maybe she misinterpreted the prompt. It's off topic, but not too bad. the examiner is giving this person full credit for the response because it's just a misinterpretation or a misunderstanding. It's not contrived. However, in this case, the examiner felt that it was misunderstood, so there's a problem here. But still, even though the examiner felt it was genuine, and even though it was off topic, marked the person down. So gave her a little on the weak side, and I believe that this happened with Lexis simply because it was off topic and it was not part of the prompt anyway. And there were also cases where it was just related to discourse, like tangents. So here, this person didn't respond perfectly to the prompt, but the examiner felt that it was unscripted and the person was just trying to come up with a genuine answer. And in this case, they specifically mentioned the tangents and also a little bit of creativity. So, you know, in normal discourse, we might talk about something for a few moments because it comes to mind, but it's not completely on topic. These examiners felt that was completely appropriate, even though it came off as somewhat off topic in these cases, but genuine. So what is really happening here? So what does the authenticity instrument reveal about about authentic engagement and also on and off topic? Well, authentic engagement in this instrument was made up of scriptedness, how much it sounds like a written prompt or something prepared beforehand, genuineness, spontaneity, and naturalness. But it's not really related to relevance. And this sort of goes against what I expected to find in the literature, because topic relevance is so often related to these issues with authentic engagement. The examiner's views of off-topic responses do indicate that memorization in canned language can be related to it. So sometimes it might be used as a really accurate indicator of something being inappropriate for the setting, but not always. There's nuances. You know, you have to dig into it and actually look at more that's going on, is what the examiners are saying. Specifically, where is this person in terms of language development? Is this test taker using formulaic language? Is that affecting the overall topic relevance in this case? It can also indicate listening comprehension problems. And I'll get into this in just a moment, but misunderstandings and misinterpretations. And it can also indicate that the person is just going on a tangent or using creative language. And so the examiners are actually having to weigh different lines of evidence sometimes. Some examiners, they just have a cut and dry, it's this and then it's this. And others, they sort of weigh what they're getting out of the discourse. So raters may feel the need to penalize off-topic responses, but not all of them did. There was some inconsistency there, and that can lead to inconsistent decision-making when it comes to scores. So there was a lot of evidence here that the raters were giving the benefit of the doubt for some performances. When they felt the test taker was being genuine and off topic, they would still be willing to give a full score. In other cases, when they felt that the test taker was being inauthentic, relying on spontaneous, on scripted speech, for example, and it was off topic, they might penalize them. So this can lead to unfair outcomes if examiners are not on the same page, if they're not using the same criteria to make these decisions. So what are the implications? I think there are a lot of implications here. And the first one is how we define the speaking test construct. Do we include listening comprehension in the construct? There are strong arguments that we should. It's part of speech. We can't communicate with others if we're not talking about the same thing. But when we design our tests, we have tests for different purposes, but we also have tasks that have different sorts of implications. If it's an interactive task with another test taker, I think it's clear that within the framework of interactional competence, responding contingently, as Daniel Lamb put it, is very, very important to the construct. So this has to be measured somehow. But if we're dealing with an oral proficiency interview type test where it's just question and answer, and the test taker misunderstands something, but we penalize them for listening comprehension, I think that this might be problematic, simply because in day-to-day life, we misunderstand each other. We misunderstand other L1 speakers of our own language. How do we get around it? How do we fix it? That's really what I believe is the key here to measure. So I think we have to be careful about how we make decisions regarding this within the construct. There's no right or wrong answer, of course, and I don't believe that there's a cut and dry method to do so. Just we have to take into account. The same thing with penalties. We have to be fair. Is an off-topic response automatically judged non-scorable? I would like to think that's not the case. If it's in the context of a test, like an interview, and the response is authentic, ostensibly, this will give us an inference into the person's level of language. Why should it be thrown out? In other cases, possibly it should be thrown out, but it has to be done in a fair way. And so really that goes to the scoring rubric. Those decisions about whether a task is off topic or on topic need to be made in a way where the raters can make those decisions reliably every single time, and they're not faced with sort of guesswork or relying on benefit of the doubt. And so that goes together with the rater training as well. And I included this ruler as, try not to bend the ruler too much. Anyway, you get it. So I'd love to take your questions now. I see that there are a couple in the chat. I'd like to refer you to these papers here that I've published to dig into the topic a bit more. If you don't have access through your library to these papers, I'm happy to send you a copy by email, and you can contact me here. And another thing I want to point out is that tomorrow at 9:05 time in Bogota, Judith Fairburn is giving a talk that goes into this issue much more thoroughly than I have, because she's doing her entire dissertation on it. And it's looking at that consistency of raters' decisions in this case. Okay, so that's 21 minutes, and I would love to take your questions now.
Thank you, Dylan. Let's see if we have any more questions. And yeah, that is correct. There are 2 questions. I will highlight them. The first one from Jamie.
All right.
Right. So defining an operationalizing definition of authenticity, I wonder if we could turn it around. Take the features of authenticity and engagement raters are noticing and use that to help define the interactive output of chatbots.
Sorry, I've got to think about this one, Jamie. So could you take the features of authenticity and engagement of raters are noticing, and use that to define the interactive output of chatbots? God, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I don't know how that would work out, Jamie. Could you be more specific, sort of in the interactive output of chatbots? I'm not sure. Is what I can say. I guess it would require, in this case, for a chatbot, for a computer to be able to detect authentic or inauthentic engagement. I don't know if it would be possible with the technology that we have right now, or maybe ever. The decisions made on authentic engagement are often, they go down to a list of features that are in my language assessment quarterly article. And it's often related to Lexis. It's often related to, discourse features that are unexpected in the task response. Raters, they'll balance that proficiency level, and they'll think, for example, if somebody has a low proficiency level and they produce like really unexpected Lexis, uncommon words or low frequency words, they might judge that as inauthentic. And there's some other features as well. So could it be possible with a chatbot? Yes, maybe. But I don't know what that would look like. So I'll have to think about that, and I'll go on to the next question.
Sure. Were these speaking samples ones that had been collected in a live test session that examiners then listened to?
Yeah, that's a great question, Misty. And I didn't have time to go into it just because of the scope today. The speaking samples I collected in live simulated test sessions. And so the test takers, they were faced with because I'd been working as an IELTS examiner in the past. And they knew they were getting a practice session. And I designed a test. It wasn't a live test, according to the general IELTS features. And they conducted the test in a very simulated real type environment. I didn't award them scores, but I did give them feedback. And they were all in a very controlled situation. They were audio recorded, not video recorded. And so for all intents and purposes, it was a research setting, so it's sort of a lab setting, I guess, in this case, but it was a simulated live test. And overall, the test takers did approach the test in a very serious manner, in a very, what I perceived as a very authentic manner. They were very nervous before the test, and the typical things that you see in a test taker when they're doing a speaking test. So that was an important part of it.
Okay, Salome Villa Larenas is asking, and she's saying that it's so interesting. But her question is, what do you think are these findings implications for task design for speaking tests?
Yeah, thanks, Salome. Well, and thanks everybody for your questions. I think there are a lot of implications, and that's where I was going into detail before about the definition of, well, for task design. I think that in this case, the test taker should have the opportunity to be corrected by the examiner. So if the test taker begins going off topic, the examiner should be able to correct that misinterpretation with no sort of penalty, I think. In other words, sort of redirected back to the task, because then you can sort of correct for those instances where there might just be a simple misinterpretation, but the person doesn't receive a full penalty. As far as task design in the sense of the construct, I think that just care has to be taken for how listening comprehension is built into it. Other task design features, might be providing definitions for any sort of problematic words that come up that you might find in piloting of the instrument or trialing of the instrument. So these types of things to sort of prevent misunderstandings as much as possible, so that the task isn't tapping into listening comprehension so much, if that's desirable, of course. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but yeah.
Okay. So Harriet has another question. We'll introduce his first idea. He says, the point about fairness is important for rubrics. Then how do examiners, raters work out if the candidate has gone off topic because they misunderstood or because they are determined to say what they have prepared?
Yeah, well, first of all, hi, Harriet. It's great to see you. It's been a minute since we celebrated New Directions Mexico, and thank you for the question as well. So, yeah, this is tough. Like, how do you determine if somebody's gone off topic because they misunderstood, or whether they were determined to say it? And this really digs into those features of authentic engagement that I was talking about. Raters do rely on these other sorts of features, but there's a lot of overlap there. And yeah, it's a great question. The study should really, and I don't know how much Judith has gone into this with her dissertation, but it's a really important question to see how they make their decisions regarding topic relevance. And I don't know if I have an answer for you, because I haven't been able to dig into those distinctions as much. But I think with misunderstandings, it's usually a case, not always, but it's usually a case of specific lexical problems. And so when you're looking at a test taker's response, you almost notice, like, there are some examples in this data set where the test taker was confusing store with, store their belongings in a room, and then also store their belongings like in a bag or go traveling or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. And the examiners noticed that immediately, that it was a problem of lexis. It was a problem of the word store. The test taker was only familiar with the word store, like as a place where you buy things, but not a place, not the act of putting something away. So I think that's one way, but I think that's a big topic and I haven't fully explored it. So definitely go to Judith's talk because she'll be talking more about that.
All right. Um, I don't. We don't have any other questions, and well, anyway, now we invite you to join the main stage for our final plenary and the conclusions of today. Goodbye, and we hope to see you back in this stage tomorrow. Also, Dylan has invited you to join Judy's Vern's presentation tomorrow. That's a very interesting suggestions to continue exploring this topic. Thank you so much, Dylan.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for coming. Thanks a lot.